All right, we have some updates on the ongoing budget negotiations for the reconciliation bill, which is meant to be the one big, beautiful bill that is supposed to house Trump's tax cuts and also a bunch of federal spending cuts across the board, pretty much to, funnily enough, only non defense programs. They are getting cut, to say the least, and a big part of that's going to be Medicare and Medicaid that we're going to talk about here in a second, while also granting hundreds of billions more to the defense budget, making it the first $1 trillion defense budget in history, and also giving like 30 or 40 billion more to Customs and Border Patrol and ICE. So, yeah, whenever the Republicans say we care about the deficit, we care about government spending, we're spending too much, they're lying. They don't care, or else they would not be increasing defense spending. It's as simple as that. We already have the largest military budget in the world. We already have the strongest military in the world. Border crossings are at an all-time low per Trump himself. So, yeah, they don't care. They don't care. And also, I hate to break it to you, but tax cuts, especially tax cuts for the rich, that is also federal spending, government spending. Anyways, let's start off with this article from Politico. There's a lot we need to cover here, just a lot. GOP leaders snubbed the hard right on Medicaid. They're vowing to fight back. Basically, there are several factions within the Republican Party right now. You have far right, like extremists that want to cut even further. They're looking at the bill and they're saying, no, we can't accept that. And it's not because it's like, hey, you're cutting Medicaid too much. It's like, oh, you're not cutting it enough. Then you have people who want to preserve Medicaid, and then you have like just kind of everyone else who's just going with whatever the majority go with. It's just which includes like modest cuts, I would say, but yeah, there's a lot of factions going on, and it's making it's making Mike Johnson's life a living hell, I am sure. Let's read. House Republican leaders appear to have won support from key moderates by backing off the most controversial proposals to overhaul Medicaid, but has created new risk for the GOP's domestic policy megabill. Fierce pressure is now building from hospitals and clinics to the Medicaid cuts that have survived, while conservative hardliners are threatening to withhold their votes if they don't get deeper trims to the safety net program. So yeah, the biggest push and pull you have here is the conservative hardliners that want to cut more, and then you have conservatives who are like, we can't, like, you're gonna get me lynched by my constituents, like we can't do this, we need to preserve Medicaid. So but they're don't get it twisted. As we're about to cover, when they say preserve Medicaid, they are still cutting the shit out of it. So like, don't get it twisted. They're gonna keep going out there and saying that Democrats are fear mongering and we're preserving Medicaid and blah 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 blah. But we are going to read the fine print in the details here, and we'll make that determination. It adds up to a bumpy road ahead for the House Energy and Commerce Committee as it prepares for a marathon meeting to advance the legislation Tuesday afternoon. The proposal, unveiled by Chair Brett Guthrie, would not slash federal reimbursement rates in most cases or impose per capita caps on payments to states, but would likely force states to revamp how they finance their programs or cut benefits. A preliminary Congressional Budget Office estimate requested by Democrats found that more than 8.6 million people would be uninsured if the health portions of the GOP's party line package becomes law. While such significant changes to Medicaid could face significant resistance in the Senate, Senator Josh Hawley, for example, wrote in New York Times op-ed Monday that big Medicaid cuts are morally wrong and politically suicidal. Guthrie appears to have the votes that he needs to make progress this week. And again, they still want to cut Medicaid. As much as they grandstand that they don't want to cut it too much or blah, 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 they're still cutting it. I don't know if you know this, but we are the only country in the developed world that doesn't guarantee free healthcare at the point of service to everyone in our country, all citizens. And here we are talking about cutting our health system even more. That's crazy. Like, healthcare is a human right. Everyone should have healthcare. End of conversation, no matter how much it costs. even though studies show that switching to a universal healthcare system and eliminating private insurance would actually save us money. So yeah, that's something to think about. Anyways, I digress. It's just crazy the world we live in. We are the only developed country, the richest country also, that doesn't have universal healthcare. And here we are cutting the little healthcare we do have while increasing defense spending. It's just really weird. Representative Nick Langsworthy from New York, an Energy and Commerce member who had been wary of the deep cuts to Medicaid, praised the bold proposal in a social media post Monday, saying it achieves our top priorities, protecting Medicaid for those who genuinely need it. Yeah, I mean, everyone needs healthcare. Everyone. You shouldn't be able to pick and choose. The critics will spread fear about cuts for political purposes, so let me be clear. The bill allows Medicare spending to increase year over year for the next 10 years, he added. But what he's failing to mention is all the additional red tape and bureaucracy they're adding to it, the work requirements they want to add to it, the more frequent checks of eligibility they want to add to it. So Republicans only hate red tape and bureaucracy unless, when it comes to like investigating their businesses or investigating the businesses and corporations of their rich friends or stopping something with the military. But like bureaucracy and red tape for programs, social safety net programs, sign me up. That's the Republican motto. A bunch of hypocrites. And I really need you guys to realize that. I don't want to read the rest of this. It's pretty much just Republicans grandstanding and saying, we're not cutting Medicaid and Medicare. Democrats are fear-mongering. And also it talks about there's some hospitals that would be shut down. There's health clinics that would be shut down. There would be not only people losing their health insurance, there would also be people losing their jobs. But more on that in a moment. So another article from Politico, Trump gets wish list in House GOP tax bill with some exceptions. This will be a little summary. We're going to dive more into some of the actual cuts here in a moment. President Donald Trump won more than he lost in the House GOP's newly unveiled tax legislation through some of his priorities. Though some of his priorities were slimmed down and his bid to raise taxes on some financial heavyweights wasn't included. Shocking. The bill, which the House Tax Writing Committee will take up Tuesday, not only delivers on his promise to make a slew of his expiring 2017 tax cuts permanent, but also includes tax relief for tips, seniors, and overtime work. Trump also got his request to give taxpayers a deduction for the interest they pay on auto loans and to limit deductions for the purchase of sports teams. That's weird. The bill leaves a placeholder to at least triple the state and local tax deduction after Trump promised blue state Republicans during the presidential campaign that he would get SALT back, a break prized by their constituents that is now capped at $10,000. The exact contours are still up for discussion, though, Speaker Mike Johnson said. In a homage to Trump's populist base, Republicans would create a new tax-preferred saving plan called a MAGA account for children under the age of 8. The draft also delivers another key Trump demand, a $4 trillion debt ceiling hike. The president raised the issue in private for months, saying he did not want to be forced into a massive spending deal with Democrats in order to avoid a debt default. Trump took to his Truth Social platform and declared the bill great. When I return from the Middle East, where great things will happen in America, we will work together on any and all outstanding issues, but there shouldn't be many. But the bill would require Trump to make some compromises. The breaks for tips, seniors, and overtime pay would last 4 years and include some restrictions for qualifying. Of course, there would be a limit on that. And of course, there would be restrictions for qualifying. But, for all the corporate tax cuts and all the tax cuts on the wealthy, whatever. That's a nod to the fiscal constraints Republican tax writers are working under, which requires trillions of dollars in spending cuts to offset some of the costs of tax cuts. Well, if you, for one, didn't increase the military budget, and that would help, but you don't actually care about cutting the deficit or getting a surplus or even paying down the debt, you just don't care. Or else you would raise taxes on the rich. And let's read what happened to that one. Trump kind of suggested that he was in favor for it. And the plan doesn't heed Trump's plan to eliminate the carried interest loophole that taxes some income earned by private equity and hedge fund managers at a lower rate than normal income. Shocking. A tax increase on the highest earning Americans, which administration officials had said was on the table, didn't make it in either. Trump himself sent conflicting signals about the idea, seeming to embrace a tiny increase while simultaneously saying it would be a bad political move. Yeah, raising taxes on the wealthy is a bad political move. Jesus Christ. Um, yeah, so this whole spending problem and these trillions of dollars of that it's going to cost, that could all be solved by either one, just letting the tax cuts for, I think the corporation ones are permanent, but the tax cuts for the wealthy, let them sunset, let them go away, keep the ones for the middle and lower class. That would already save you trillions, because most of the trillions and most of all this cutting is about is paying for the tax cuts for the rich. And you know a way where you could just solve a lot of your problems if you really cared about the debt and the deficit? You could even just do a modest increase of the wealthy, the top 1%'s taxes, but they will never actually do it. At most, Trump will pretend he will and say, like, yeah, sure. Yeah. Of course, this isn't the end of the road for the bill. It's just the beginning. The massive bill's path through the GOP's slim majority in the House is by no means assured. Deficit hawks are still upset. Rep. Chip Roy from Texas took to X after the bill's release to complain about the GOP plans leaves more than $20 trillion in additional debt in 10 years, and most of the spending cuts are beyond the Trump years. Yeah, if you cared so much, then why aren't you complaining that we're still increasing the military budget by hundreds of billions? And why aren't you complaining about the massive tax cuts to the rich? I'm all for extending and making the tax cuts for the middle and lower class permanent, but for the rich, it's like you could just solve this problem pretty simply. Assuming the legislation gets to the House, some additional business breaks are likely to be added in the Senate, but the chamber could also pair things. The House tax is a good start, said John Cornyn on Monday. Asked what changes he wants. Cornyn quipped, "How much time do you have? I don't have that much time. I want to wait and see what the House actually passes because these at this point are just sort of ideas." Trump's top economic advisor, Kevin Hassett, appeared to acknowledge as much shortly after House Republicans released the bill Monday, calling it a great first step. Now, this is real quick on some of the EV tax credit things they're doing away with. Let's read that. This is from Reuters. Republicans in the U.S. House of Representatives on Monday proposed killing the electric vehicle tax and tax credit and repealing fuel efficiency rules designed to prod automakers into building more zero-emission vehicles as a part of a broad-based tax reform bill. The proposal, which is set for a House Ways and Means Committee hearing on Tuesday, would repeal a $7,500 new vehicle tax credit and a $4,000 used vehicle credit on December 31st, although it would maintain a new vehicle credit for an additional year for automakers that have not yet sold 200,000 EVs. The president of the Electric Drive Transportation Association, Genevieve Cullen, criticized the proposal, saying the plans abandon U.S. leadership in energy innovation by gutting federal investment in electrification are catastrophically short-sighted. The proposal, she said, would deliver an enormous market advantage to competitors like China and threaten U.S. manufacturing and jobs. The U.S. Treasury in 2024 awarded more than $2 billion in point-of-sale rebates for EVs. It's crazy because $2 billion is a drop in the bucket, a literal drop in the bucket, like 0.0001%, 5% of our budget. And, of course, that's something we just have to do away with because fuck anything green energy. The provision, which would take effect in 2027, could bar credits for cars powered by Chinese battery technology licensed by American companies such as Ford Motor or Tesla. House Republicans also proposed to kill a loan program that supports the manufacture of certain advanced technology vehicles. It would rescind any unobligated funding and rescind corporate average fuel economy standards and greenhouse gas emission rules for 2027 and beyond. The portion will be taken up by the Energy and Commerce Committee. Among outstanding loans finalized in President Joe Biden's last week in office, $9.63 billion to a joint venture of Ford Motor and South Korean battery makers SK on for construction of 3 battery manufacturing plants in Tennessee and Kentucky, $7.54 billion to a joint venture of Chrysler, Parrot, Stellantis, and Samsung for 2 EV lithium-ion battery plants in Indiana, and $6.57 to Rivian for a plant in Georgia to begin building smaller, less expensive EVs in 2028. So Yeah, they want to kill all that. They want to shut down plants that we are trying to build, manufacturing capability we're trying to build. All of that just to save, a couple billion. Like, even if this was 20 billion, 30 billion, that is still less than 1% of our budget for what sounds like something that creates a lot of jobs and brings manufacturing back to the US. But of course, Republicans and Trump don't actually care about that. Now, let's read. I have some highlights here about some of the more specific cuts to Medicaid and other programs. So the House Republican plan calls for at least, remember how I said they aren't cutting, they are preserving Medicaid, or they aren't cutting Medicaid too much, or they're preserving Medicaid for those who need it. Let's break that down and see what that actually means. Because Republicans always do this funny thing where they're like, we're going to cut this program by billions and it's still going to work the exact same. They say this for everything. And I'm sorry, but that's just not how it works. You can't take away half a program's funding and expect it to function the same. You can't cut 80% of the staffing for an agency and say, yeah, it's going to remain the same. Especially when these are programs, agencies, etc., that were already struggling and probably needed more staff and funding to begin with. The House Republican plan calls for at least $600 billion in cuts to Medicaid and the Children's Health Insurance Program CHIP, a predominantly from Medicaid. These would be the largest cuts to the Medicaid program in history by many hundreds of billions of dollars, and according to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, would rip health insurance away from more than 8 million vulnerable Americans that we talked about earlier. The plan calls to institute work requirements on many Medicaid enrollees. In reality, these are work reporting requirements that institute paperwork requirements that end up keeping people who meet the requirements off of Medicaid. Every attempt at implementing work reporting requirements to date has led to catastrophic results, massive coverage losses, including among people who are working because of needless red tape without actually encouraging work. It is worth noting that the only way to achieve savings through this method is for people currently using Medicaid to lose coverage. In addition to cutting thousands of lives short each year, these losses have significant ripple effects. So 2 things I want to say about this. The first thing, as I mentioned earlier, Republicans just hate bureaucracy and red tape and all this stuff, except for when it comes to like social programs and, getting people help if they need it. So that's number 1. And number 2 is I'm tired of these work requirements. Like, healthcare as a whole is tied to work. Typically, your health insurance is under your employer. So you lose your job, you lose your health insurance. Like, what the hell kind of system are we living in where like we pick and choose who has and doesn't have health care? If you're not working, you don't deserve health care. It doesn't matter why you're not working, but we deem you don't get health care. I don't care why you're not working. I really don't care. Everyone in this country, every citizen deserves health care. Health care is a human right. End of conversation. The Commonwealth Fund estimates that onerous work requirements for Medicaid coverage could result in the loss of nearly 450,000 jobs. Unsurprisingly, nearly half of these job losses would hit the healthcare sector. Even worse, work reporting requirements can trap sick people by making it more difficult for them to obtain the medical care they need, that they need to return to work and qualify for Medicaid in the first place. Insane. The largest SNAP cuts in history, around 1 in 8 Americans receive nutrition assistance through SNAP. The program is a particularly crucial lifeline for hungry children. Nearly 62% of SNAP households have children. SNAP benefits are already meager at a little more than $2 per person per meal. The House Republican plan calls for cutting SNAP by more than $290 billion, close to 30%. This will be the largest SNAP cuts in history by far. This would result in food being taken away from the hungry. The House Republican plan would fundamentally rework SNAP by shifting costs to the states, leaving them responsible for funding a meaningful portion of the program. This massive shifting of costs to states could force states to make painful cuts to programs that meet people's basic needs, such as education and public safety, which with the abolishing the Department of Education, that's already putting more burden on states to make up for the public school funding costs. And there's also been COVID era related health grants programs that have been ended that states were using for other programs, hiring more nurses, etc. That is being ended. So their solution is take away everything from the federal government and just burden the states with it. This will be particularly acute during recessions when state revenue declines but SNAP needs increase. The language of the bill is unclear, but it's possible that SNAP assistance would end entirely if a state is unable or unwilling to meet its newly assigned portion of the cost. Additionally, the paperwork requirements that target older Americans and families with children are particularly incongruous with the goals of SNAP, as food assistance is intended to keep families afloat when a family member loses a job. SNAP is among the economy's strongest automatic stabilizers in times of economic downturns, as it quickly injects support for a family's most immediate needs and is spent in the local community. Plan also proposes to block future administration's ability to implement benefit adjustments under the Thrifty Food Plan that could allow the value of SNAP to erode over time, just as it did for roughly 50 years before an update in 2021 under Joe Biden increased benefits to reflect the current cost of a healthy diet without future ability to do similar update. This could continually cut nutrition for all recipients as the standards used to calculate benefits become more outdated. Spending more on travel. Not only does this bill cut the financial support that makes new and used cars more affordable, but it also adds an extra $250 annual fee on people who already own an EV and $100 for hybrid car owners. Higher cost of financing college. 1 in 8 Americans have federal student loans with an average payment of almost $400. The House Republican plan increases costs for students in several ways. It eliminates subsidized loans for undergraduates, requiring students to pay interest on loans that accrues while they are in school, introduces new and updated repayment plans, which increase payments for the lowest income borrowers, and change enrollment requirements for Pell Grants that would force recipients to take on more courses or see reduced award levels up to $1,500 annually. Overall, the legislation cuts around $350 billion for federal programs that help make higher education more accessible and affordable. Yeah, so the Republicans don't care about you. I don't know how I can make that more clear. Like, put the pieces of the puzzle together, draw the dots, connect the dots, and you should be able to obviously see that they are cutting everything we just talked about while still increasing the defense budget by hundreds of billions. The Pentagon, by the way, has failed like the last, 15 audits. It can't account for over half of the money it spends. But yeah, let's throw another $100 billion at it. Oh, man. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, and I will see you in the next one. If you made it to this point in the video, I just want to give a special thank you. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button down below, and if you really enjoyed it, maybe consider hitting that subscribe button while you're down there. I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section. I will try to reply to any and all comments that I can. Until next time, watch that video on screen.